Imagine an empire so powerful, so wealthy, it actually threatened the rise of Rome itself, a civilization with incredible military genius. Now, imagine that same empire almost completely wiped from the history books, its story told only by the rival that burned it to the ground. Well, that's the story of Carthage.
Okay, let's just dive right in. Even Rome's greatest poet, Virgil, writing more than a century after Carthage was gone, he couldn't help but describe it in these epic, almost fearful terms. You gotta understand, this wasn't just any old enemy, this was the rival, the one that defined Rome's own story.
And that really brings us to the central mystery here. If Carthage was the superpower, a civilization that nearly changed the entire course of Western history, why do we know so little about it? From their own perspective, why is it so often just a supporting character in the story of Rome?
To find the answer, we have to go back. I mean, way back, to the very beginning. We need to understand what this empire really was before it ever clashed with Rome. And it all kicks off with a really brilliant founding legend. So, the story goes, it was founded by Princess Dido, who was basically a refugee fleeing from the Phoenician city of Tyre. The local ruler supposedly promised her as much land as she could cover with a single ox hide. So what does she do? With this incredible cleverness, she cuts the hide into paper-thin strips, ties them all together, and encircles an entire hill. Right from the start, their story wasn't about brute force. It was about ingenuity.
And that origin story is baked right into its name. In their native language, Phoenician, Carthage was Carthage, which just means new city. It started out as a little colony, an outpost of the great seafaring power of Tyre. But oh man, it was destined to become so much more. But hey, you don't build an empire on clever legends alone, right? Carthage's rise was fueled by something way more tangible, just staggering economic power and a surprisingly sophisticated system of government.
Take a look at this. Carthage completely dominated trade in the Mediterranean. Their secret weapon? A near monopoly on tin from Spain. Now, you might think, tin, who cares? But tin was everything. It was the essential ingredient you needed to make bronze, and bronze was the core material for weapons, for tools, for just about everything important. Add to that massive silver mines and some of the best farmland in the ancient world, and you've got the engine of a true superpower.
And this whole economic machine wasn't run by some all-powerful king. Nope. Carthage was an oligarchic republic, ruled by a handful of wealthy families. At the very top, they had two annually elected leaders called suffetes, which basically means judges. They held the executive power, a lot like the consuls of their future rival, Rome. And get this, their system was so good, so stable, that the great Greek philosopher Aristotle wrote about it with total admiration. He loved its constitution, praised its balance of power, and even said it was on par with the famously disciplined system of Sparta. This was no backward society. This was a highly organized and respected political force.
Their system also had this really unique separation of powers. Unlike a lot of other places, military and political jobs were kept completely separate. Generals had to answer to this powerful tribunal called the 104. And if a general failed, well, the punishment could be a massive fine or even crucifixion. Talk about accountability. It made sure the military always served the state.
So as this incredible trading republic expanded its power across the Mediterranean, it was set on a collision course with another rising republic, one that was built on a totally different idea. Not trade, but pure conquest. The stage was absolutely set for one of the greatest rivalries in all of history. And this wasn't some quick little spat. The Punic Wars were a brutal, multi-generational slugfest that went on for over 100 years. We're talking 3 distinct, incredibly bloody wars that would decide the fate of the entire Western Mediterranean and shape the destinies of both Rome and Carthage forever.
In the Second Punic War, Carthage unleashes one of the greatest military minds in all of history, Hannibal Barca. His plan was so audacious, it was borderline insane. Cross the freezing Alps with an army and war elephants to attack Rome on its home turf. And for over a decade, it worked. He handed the Romans defeat after crushing defeat, bringing the Republic closer to total collapse than it had ever been before.
So you're probably wondering, how on earth did he pay for all this? Well, this number gives you a pretty good idea. A single Carthaginian silver mine in Spain was churning out 300 Roman pounds of silver every single day. That's enough to pay thousands of soldiers. This incredible wealth is what let Carthage go toe-to-toe with the world's rising military superpower for years and years. But even Hannibal's genius and all of Carthage's money weren't enough in the end. Rome survived, and its desire for revenge, well, that would lead to the final tragic chapter of this story, and the answer to our big question. The absolute terror Hannibal had put into Rome eventually hardened into this cold, obsessive hatred. A very influential senator, Cato the Censor, started ending every single speech he gave in the Senate, no matter what the topic was, with these 5 chilling words: Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. It became a national obsession. And in 1466 BCE, they finally got their wish. After a horrifying 3-year siege, Roman legions stormed the city. What happened next wasn't war, it was annihilation. The city was leveled, its people sold into slavery, and this is the part that hurts the most for history, its libraries, full of its records, its literature, its entire perspective on the world, were systematically put to the torch.
And that right there is why Carthage is a footnote. Its voice was deliberately silenced. We see Carthage almost entirely through the eyes of its enemies, the people who destroyed it. It's the ultimate example of history being written by the victors. It's only now, really, through modern archaeology, that we're slowly digging up the truth and getting a glimpse of the real Carthage, a story told by artifacts, not enemy propaganda.
But here's the final twist in the story. Even an act of such complete and total destruction couldn't completely erase an entire civilization. The ghost of Carthage lived on, its influence echoing through the culture of its conquerors in some really surprising ways.
Get this, the Romans were so impressed by Carthaginian farming that the Senate specifically ordered one agricultural book by a writer named Mago to be saved from the fires and translated into Latin. Punic words started creeping into their language, like they called the pomegranate the mala punica, the Punic apple. For centuries, the Punic language was still spoken in North Africa, and some towns were even allowed to keep using the old title of Sufet for their leaders. This just shows you how deep cultural identity runs. 500 years, think about that, 5 centuries after their great city was turned to dust, St. Augustine, a hugely important figure in the late Roman Empire, wrote that people out in the countryside, when you asked them who they were, still said they were Tertonnani, or Canaanites, a direct link to their ancient Phoenician ancestors. Which leaves us with one last big thought. The story of Carthage is more than just ancient history. It's a huge lesson about memory and loss. If an empire this wealthy, this sophisticated, and this powerful could be so completely silenced, it just makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other great stories, how many other entire civilizations have been lost to time, simply because the victors were the only ones left to tell the tale?